got some Miami Heat trade rumors on today's episode of the Heat Report by Chat Sports. I am your host, Nic Rohloff. Bleacher Report had an interesting article that had trade targets for every single team. And we mentioned on yesterday's show for Cam Johnson going to the Miami Heat as a trade target. If you didn't see it, go watch yesterday's video and make sure you are subscribed. But today, we're going to talk about some of the trade ideas or trade destinations they had for players that could be leaving the Miami Heat. And we'll start with these two guys because these are the main two players that the Heat potentially could trade away, according to this article. Jimmy Butler was featured twice, so we'll have two different Jimmy Butler ideas or destinations, as well as a Kevin Love one, which I thought was interesting that we're going to talk about. But we're going to start with Jimmy Butler, and the first destination they had for J-Butt was actually to the Houston Rockets. The Rockets are obviously Jimmy's hometown team. He's from the city of Houston, and I think it would be an interesting pairing for Butler and the Rockets. But first, Bleacher Report said that Butler's happiness in Miami with no contract extension is worth monitoring for the Rockets. A Houston, Texas native, Butler could be intrigued by the idea of a return to his home city and the challenge of leading a young team towards the championship. And if you've been subscribed to the channel, if you're not, I don't know what you're doing. We put out daily content on the Heat, but if you really just think back to the early parts of the offseason, in June, in early July, when Jimmy Butler trade rumors were more of a topic of discussion because there was still no resolution on the contract thing. And yes, the Heat didn't give him one, but it was possible that he requested a trade. Ultimately not going to happen. He loves to be in Miami. But when we were talking about Jimmy Butler trades, I labeled Houston as the number one team I would want to trade Jimmy to because they have the most to give you in return. They have unbelievable trade assets down in Houston. Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith, Cam Whitmore, and then they also have 9 tradable first-round picks. Oh, and they also just drafted someone third overall, Reed Shepard, who looked extremely good in Summer League and would be someone I would be intrigued with. They have young talent in terms of forwards, guards. Listen, Jones Green, top 3 pick. Amen Thompson, top 5 pick. Jabari Smith, top 3 pick. Reed Shepard, top 3 pick. And they've all shown the promise and potential in different areas. Like Jalen Green's that scorer. Amen Thompson's that unbelievable athletic guard that can also clamp you up. Jabari Smith is an excellent 4. He would pair up really nicely next to Bam because of his ability to defend, hit some jumpers, and his size. Whitmore's an athletic wing. And then Reed Shepard looks like a true point guard that can also play a little bit of off-ball. I think if there was a trade for Miami getting rid of Jimmy Butler, I think Houston, if they are interested, are the team that I would most likely want to deal with. But first, let me know, would you consider trading Jimmy Butler? And you could also throw in the possibility of the Heat being bad because let's be honest here, if the Heat are actually going to trade Jimmy Butler this season, it's going to be because the team actually stunk and there is no reason to keep him going into a potential free agency situation this upcoming year. But let me know if you'd consider it even if the Heat stink. We have another Jimmy Butler trade idea coming up at the end of today's video, but before we get to the Jimmy Butler one, I do want to talk about Kevin Love's trade idea because the fine folks over at Bleacher Report actually suggested a trade to the Denver Nuggets, which caught me a little surprised, if you will. Love re-signed with Miami this summer, although his spot in the rotation could get squeezed out if young forwards like Jaime Jaquez Jr. and Nikola Jokic continue to grow and develop. Love would bring some much-needed shooting to Denver's second unit and get to reunite with Westbrook, that is Russell Westbrook, his former college teammate at UCLA. And not to rain on the parade of Denver Nuggets fans out there, our Bleacher Report NBA staff writing this article, but I just simply don't see a world where Kevin Love gets traded away from the Miami Heat. And you might be saying, well, why? Kevin Love's not that important to Miami. Why would they never trade Kevin? Well, if you just go back to NBA free agency, Love was a free agent, and the Heat re-signed him to a 2-year, $8 million contract. And that is not a 1+1. That is 2 years fully guaranteed for Kevin Love. And at this stage of Kevin's career, I think he realizes that he is not going to be someone that gets a ton of minutes. And maybe if he was on Denver, he would be the backup big to Jokic or play alongside him after they drafted Duran Holmes this draft, and then he tore his Achilles in Summer League, which was a big-time bummer. So Kevin could get PT as the backup center in Denver, but I think he signed a 2-year fully guaranteed contract with Miami because he wants to end his career as a veteran presence in the 305 for this Heat roster, which is why I don't think he would want to be traded elsewhere. And I don't think Miami wants to get rid of him either, because having someone with experience and leadership on the end of your bench almost acts as another coach, like what Udonis Haslem was doing for the final couple of years. And it's a valuable piece to have at the end of your roster. You're never actually playing all 14 guys, so having one guy be a pseudo coach at the end of your bench, but also be a morale booster and a good leader and teacher of young men is really, really useful. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel because we put out daily content and we cover the Heat with everything that goes around this basketball team. Make sure you hit that sub button because when the season gets underway in about a couple months, training camp starting at the beginning of October, season late October, don't miss a thing. All right, to round out the conversation on Kevin, the reason why I wouldn't want to trade him to Denver either is because he's not going to go for much. Like, if you really think about what Kevin Love would go for in a trade, it would likely be like a second-round pick. And I actually value Kevin Love's veteran presence, leadership, and mentorship, especially to a young guy like Kel'el Ware, who the Heat are banking on being someone that stays in this organization long-term. Like, you're going to need Kevin to mentor him and help him get through his first season. So I think that usage of Love is more valuable than him actually being on the court, and I would rather have that for this year and maybe next year, help mentoring and continuing to be a leader, rather than a second-round pick in 2027. Maybe you disagree with me, but I just feel like Kevin Love's leadership is actually something I'd rather keep in Miami. All right, the aforementioned Jimmy Butler other trade idea. This one is to the Memphis Grizzlies. This one is fascinating to me, not that they actually gave a trade idea, but because I think Jimmy Butler in Memphis could really help them get over the hump. You think of a potential three-man group of Jimmy, Ja Morant, and Jaren Jackson Jr., and you're talking about a team that could really make some headwaves in the Western Conference. And I could have mentioned Desmond Bane, but if I'm trading Jimmy Butler to Memphis, I'm likely asking for Desmond Bane in return. And I don't know if Memphis would be even willing to part ways with Bane. He's been so good. They gave him a massive contract extension. The someone who Miami could have drafted as well ultimately went in a different way. Bane is probably the top asset they have if they wanted to make a big splash. Like I said, I don't know if they'd be willing to trade him, but other names are Gigi Jackson, who is a talented young wing, not really that good of a defender, but super raw, still only 19, 20 years old after being the youngest player in the 2023 NBA draft. But they also have 4 tradable first-round picks, which could be enticing as well. Maybe it's a pick-laced package going to Miami, or if they want to get a player like I would, it would be probably Desmond Bane. More to talk here on Jimmy Butler, but make sure you are representing the Miami Heat in the best way possible with this Heat shirt. Chatsports.com/Heat shirt is the link. On sale, $10 off for $20 right now. You're not going to find a better price for a shirt this good looking and this comfortable. One more time, chatsports.com/Heat shirt. Links in the description and comments. All right, we talked about Jimmy potentially going to Houston, potentially going to Memphis, but the truth of the situation is this. I don't want to trade Jimmy Butler. I don't. I said this 3 months ago, and I still remain to this point. I'd like to see Jimmy finish his career as a member of a Miami Heat basketball team that wins an NBA championship. But here's the reality of the situation. If the Heat are absolutely horrible this year, they should explore a Jimmy Butler trade. They should. And why should they? It's because that 2025 player option. There is a realistic scenario here, folks, that Jimmy Butler opts out. He's a free agent. And then you potentially lose him for nothing. And maybe that's a little far-fetched because a team that could potentially want to sign Jimmy Butler, or a good team where Butler would want to go, probably doesn't have enough cap space. I already looked ahead. Cap space isn't that good for good competitive teams out there. So maybe it would still be a sign and trade from a year from now. But if you can capitalize, and the Heat are, say, at the deadline, 7 games under 500. Looks like another lost season, riddled with injuries, or the team just isn't meshing together, which I don't forecast. I don't think that's going to happen. But let's say they are 7 games under 500 going to the trade deadline. If there are teams willing to give you a very sizable trade package where you're getting a good young player, maybe 2 good young players, plus first-round picks in return for Jimmy Butler's services, that is something that you have to explore because you can't let this go on until you lose Jimmy for nothing. And if your team stinks, then Butler could be on the move. I don't want that to happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but it is something that we would talk about. If we're talking about this in late January and the Heat are a bad basketball team and it's clear that they're not going to do anything, maybe we do end up talking about Jimmy Butler trades. Don't want it, don't think, but never know. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of the Heat Report. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel because we're going to give you daily content around the Miami Heat. We're breaking down everything surrounding this basketball team every single day. As always, folks, I'll see you in another video tomorrow.